So yeah, this will be a a summary of the work we've done over the past couple seasons and an introduction to the project as a whole. So NAC project located in central British Columbia. It's an early stage project focused on advancing our understanding of what's turning out to be a very large copper gold molybdenum porphyry system. Uh, our work so far has demonstrated that we have some pretty considerable size and grade potential. And a result of our work in 2022 and 2023 has been substantially expanding the historically defined mineralized zones in all dimensions. So this just presentation will just go through project's history, exploration, uh, our interpretation so far, and how that's guiding our future work plans here. So first off, the great thing about the NAC project is its location. It is completely road accessible with a pretty well-maintained network of logging roads. There is a fully serviced logging and exploration camp about 50 kilometers from the property, which is where we stage all our operations out of. And then it's about an hour drive to Smithers for supplies. So it's very well positioned. Um, it's also very well located within the province in terms of topography and weather. I mean, it gets cold in the winter, but it doesn't get the 30, 40 feet of snow you get up in the Golden Triangle. It's inland, it's not on the coast. It's very mellow, gently undulating terrain. Uh, there's lots of water access. Uh, Absolute worst case scenario, we can draw water from Nakalinarak Lake, which is less than 2 kilometers away from the drill site. We run the hose up the drill road. So it makes exploring very, very feasible. In addition to that, it's being clear cut. There is active logging on the property, or at least was up until 2021. So the main exploration area is completely within a logging clear cut, so it really minimizes our site disturbance for drilling. In general, helicopter access isn't required. Some of the further afield spots of the property could be serviced by helicopter access, but the great thing is we're permitted to put exploration trails into those. So if we find encouragement, like we did in one of the heli sites from last year, the only heli site from last year, we'll be able to access it with a drill road, which is fantastic. And all this means it's possible to explore year round. Should this get to an advanced stage with that kind of funding, exploring in the winter here is very feasible. So it's not like there's mandatory shutdown or times of year where you simply can't drill. So yeah, property location, aside from the mineralization, has a lot going for it. Just to put it in a bit of a regional context there, Smithers is about 80 kilometers to the southwest. We're right at the northern end of the Babine Porphyry Belt. You can see a little bit further to the south is the Morrison deposit, and then the previously operating Bell Mine and Grand Isle Mine. And we're enveloped by Amark Boleden's Duke Project joint venture. So there's a lot of active exploration going on. I don't want to say as a result of our success in 2022, but it's definitely ramped up since then. So it's great. It means there's a lot of logistical economies to be had for doing exploration work in the region. So diving into the historical work, when American Eagle took the project on, there'd been about 18,000 meters of shallow drilling. It was initially explored in the 60s by Noranda when they discovered the rest of the Bell, Grand Isle, Babine porphyries. And so the district was known to host copper gold porphyry. And this was following up a VLF EM signature and a magnetic signature. So in 1964 to 1971, they drilled 28 very small BQ gauge drill holes, but only drilled 1,800 meters. So you divide 1,800 by 28; those are pretty shallow. They were basically just testing through the till into the top of bedrock, and they found a pretty broad copper anomaly at the top of bedrock, but it wasn't At the time, there was no road access. It was all helicopter access. And so they focused their efforts on the closer, more accessible deposits. It wasn't until the mid-90s that any sort of drilling was done here in earnest, and that was about 1,500, or sorry, 15,000 meters of drilling over 71 holes. Even still, very shallow drilling, right? Average hole depth, or average hole length, I should say, is 216 meters. And these were by and large incline holes between 45 and 55 degrees. So very few holes actually tested deeper than 200 meters. Only 7 holes tested deeper than 300 meters. So literally just scratching the surface still. But they had quite a bit of success. They defined some fairly large, low grade near surface zones of mineralization, a north zone and a south zone. And we'll go over that. But through our drilling, it's looking like these zones are more than likely linked very clearly to the same, much larger system. And then in 2008, 4 holes were drilled by Copper Ridge, totaling just shy of 1,000 meters. So again, 250-meter deep holes, not crazy deep, basically just confirming the historical grades. In addition to that, though, there were some IP surveys, ZTEM survey done actually, and magnetic surveying. And this is part of the reason why American Eagle took on the project. This now you can see is the IP chargeability halo, and it's that classic chargeability donut. The porphyry stock is, this pink blob right in the middle of the property. Porphyry stock is central to this phyllic alteration halo, this broad pyrite halo around the outside, and that is almost a 4-kilometer wide alteration halo. And it's broadly symmetrical too, which has important implications. So this really drew the eyes of American Eagle to the project, and it led to a geophysical reinterpretation prior to acquiring the project, and that guided the initial targeting in 2022. So there was a deep coincident resistivity anomaly within a magnetic susceptibility anomaly at a very favorable spot within the broader IP chargeability halo. So a lot of things lined up that had similarities to other porphyry deposits, other world-class porphyry deposits. So yeah, in 2022 and 2023, the programs were very successful. 17 drill holes totaling just shy of 14,000 meters. And you can see the main area of focus right now on the property. These red collars are the holes that have been drilled by American Eagle in relation to the shallow historical drilling. All holes drilled encountered broad zones of copper, gold, molybdenum mineralization. And within these holes, many holes encountered more discrete zones, up to 300 meters wide, of very high porphyry, copper, gold, molybdenum grades for this part of the province. So we're very encouraged by that. Near surface mineralization at the south zone was significantly expanded in 2022. Up here, this was a top-down 3D perspective view of the historical drilling. And in the next image, exact same image, but you can see with the 2022, 2023 holes now added to the map. The first hole in 2022 was drilled about 100 meters away from the best historical intercept and encountered much better grades, very continuous from surface. So from surface down to about 120 meters depth, very strong gold and copper mineralization. And the same was true down to almost 300 meters depth in hole 2. So hole 2 had the top 300 meters of hole 2 were 0.6 copper equivalent. So right off the bat, we really expanded this near surface high grade zone at the south. And in 2023, we decided to continue seeing how far it expanded to the west, and we were in mineralization down to about 650 meters depth. We never got out of it. It subdued a little bit after the the gold-rich zone, and then really picked up again around 300 meters. And that's a completely new zone. There are no historical holes anywhere close to that. So that really redirected our focus in 2023. We weren't anticipating to hit that. It was very good we did. We knew in order to make a go of this that mineralization needed to be hosted out in these areas to add the scale, especially the scale that our funding partners, Tech, are looking for. And so we were very successful in doing that and showed similar continuity, not quite as high grade, but very nice and continuous in hole 10 to the north. And hole 11, we stepped to the west, was even stronger mineralization. And hole 17, which was our last hole of the program, showed that mineralization was continuous from very near surface, starting at 98 meters depth, and continuing right the way through hole 11, and then south of hole 8, and showing some very high grade spikes within that. So very good to see. And then not to forget about the North Zone. The North Zone is also very compelling. It's not that far away, really, about 500 meters away to the north. Shows much more copper-rich mineralization. So the North Zone is where we see the bulk of our bornite chalcocite mineralization. Hole 12 was a step back from hole 4, which was one of our more compelling holes last season. Near surface, we hit almost 40 meters of a near 1% copper equivalent dike, and that's it's 0.88 copper in that dike. So almost entirely copper. Beautiful disseminated bornite mineralization. If anyone's at Roundup, we'll have some of that core on display, and it's pretty spectacular. Then we hit a similar, more subdued zone of mineralization, a bit spotty in there, until about 350 meters depth, when continuity and grade really picked up until we got well into the Babian Porphyry stock. So showed a very broad zone of mineralization, at least in that east-west plane, and extending to depth. So the North Zone holds considerable potential as well. And the holes bounding at 13 had a very nice zone to the south of that. And we have some pretty compelling geophysics that link that up, which I'll get to a bit later in the presentation. And the same story for 14 to the north. And then even hole 5, which we drilled in 2022, which is further north still. I mean, it's not a dead hole. That's still graded over 0.2 copper equivalent from top to bottom, with some decent spikes in there. So it's the North Zone is still very open, especially at depth. And then finally, our second hole of the program, MAC 2309, was the only helicopter accessed hole, and this was testing a similar position in the geophysical anomaly and a similar geological position in terms of distance away from the porphyry stock. Drilled 450 meters, almost 500 meters from the nearest historical collar, and about 650 meters from the extent of our testing in the South Zone. Right off the top, we encountered about 120 meters of 0.4 copper equivalent, with some pretty strong gold and molybdenum grades complementing that copper. Actually, a very similar geochemical signature to what we were encountering deeper in the west of the South Zone. So we're seeing geological and mineralization analogs much further away from any historical drilling, and we're very encouraged by that. And we'll see a bit later in the presentation here why we think this zone is still very prospective. We hit a lot of smoke in this hole, and some early geophysical modeling from some deeper IP survey that took towards the end of the season this year shows why this zone has a lot of potential. So a bit more detail of the South Zone, this more recent intercept that we had, 302 meters of 1.09 copper equivalent. And that was 0.4 copper, 0.53 gold, and 0.046% moly. So very strong moly, very strong gold for this style of porphyry deposit, and very consistent copper as well. And that was within 450 meters for the best mineralized zone of 0.89 copper equivalent. So these are very, very strong numbers. And what's coming into focus right now through the south zone and the north zone is we have this broad, moderate grade area of mineralization, very large. It extends, up to 700 meters in strike length that we tested, up to 400 meters in the east-west dimension, up to almost a kilometer in depth. And within that, we have some very nice high-grade zones. And we have very limited drilling, right? We have 17 drill holes that are 7 centimeters wide over a very large area of rock to explore. And already we're intersecting some very high grade mineralization and strongly anomalous mineralization everywhere. So it shows we're not drilling down a narrow, pencil-like structure, which was one of the hypotheses for hole 11 because it was so much stronger than hole 8. What this shows is there's likely a wider, broader mineralized corridor that certainly trends in the east-west dimension and very likely extends to the north and to the south based on the geophysics. Moving to the north zone, there's some considerable high grade, well below the historically defined extent of the north zone mineralization. The north zone mineralization was shallow near surface. All of these holes are holes the company drilled and show a very nice zone of very copper rich and decently gold rich mineralization at depth below this. So yeah, very encouraging to see, and that's open to the north and to the south, and to lesser extents east and the west in certain dimensions. It's there's a lot of ground to test in here. And so, yeah, this is a preliminary IP section from the deeper IP survey this year. So I'll just go back to that 3D slide here. We ran 3 deep seeing IP lines from extending off the southeastern corner of our property, extending up to the northeast. And the longer you make an IP line, the more confidence you have in interpreting results at depth. And the problem with the historical IP survey was that it only really saw it down to a depth confidently of about 150, 200 meters max. They weren't very long lines. And the technology at the time with the 3D IP just wasn't what it is today. So we ran some much longer lines and integrated that data. We had our geophysicists integrate that data with the older data set to generate a new inversion model. And from that, we were able to generate these 2D sections. And it shows a very strong correlation between the location within the system that seem to have the highest likelihood of our best mineralized grade dropping out. The highest abundance of mineralized veins, the highest abundance of dissemination within the conglomeratic host rocks. So there's a very good agreement between this IP shoulder, as we're calling it, this transition between the lower grade porphyry core. So this line here kind of defines on the western side where our porphyry core is, and envelopes the zone of our most compelling mineralization. And that shows it's not a perfectly straight down cylindrical expression as the porphyry stock is. So it looks like there might have been some more action going on closer to surface to the west. We simply don't know. There's no historical drilling, no outcrop. So that's another avenue to focus on for next season. But what's really compelling with this is the symmetry around the porphyry stock of this geophysical signature and the fact that it extends to the north as well. So this relationship, again, this is a 3D slice through the inversion voxel model. This relationship holds to the north. We have a little bit of an IP blip at surface for some middling chargeability, and that correlates well to the mineralization near surface. And then as we get closer to this boundary, this is where our grade seems to lie. Completely untested on the west side, and untested north and south of this. So there's very little drilling that actually intersected this exact spot within the system, and it's a pretty broad spot. Like this is, we're talking 300 to 400 meters wide, with the potential to expand in both dimensions. Uh, Similar expression stepping to the south through the south zone, so 17, bit broader here, and so and this is a broader targeting tool, but it's not often you see an agreement this well with geophysics and mineralization. So it's very, very encouraging to see. And when we step over a perpendicular section along trend of that 2309, and there's a little bit more complexity going on in the IP signature at depth down to the south of the porphyry stock, and that's very interesting. We think if we were a bit closer to this transition, and maybe actually even within this chargeability, we did not see a ton of pyrite in hole 9. That's a good sign. It's all chalcopyrite. So stepping a bit further to the south seems to be that sweet spot within the potassic alteration pre-transition into that phyllic zone that seems to be where our high grade is dropping. So broad copper mineralization all around that. A lot of potential to host some higher grade mineralization. And this takes us into how we're setting up our off season to plan for 2024. In general, 2023 it revealed there's significant zones of high grade mineralization within a much broader package of moderate grade. And geologically, these are commonly associated, these higher grade zones are commonly associated with the presence of mineralized diking. So there's a number of different phases of intrusion. We have some geochronology results back that we sent back last season of these dikes, and they're all very similar age, 52 to 53 million years, so firmly within that Eocene Bavian Porphyry. But it shows that this was probably likely a pretty long-lasted system with a number of different phases, and these different phases are associated with different mineralization. And so a big part of the work over this off season is going back through the core with the full suite of 4-acid trace element geochemistry that we got done on every meter of core that we drilled this year, and picking out some zones that maybe we missed because of there's widespread biacidic magnetite potassic alteration that obscures these contacts. So really picking out the frequency of these dikes and tying them together along that section in the south, hole 17, hole 8, hole 11, is going to give us a lot of clues as to the geometry and orientation of these dikes. And the more intercepts we get through these mineralized, these higher grade corridors, the potential lies for us to maybe be able to vector into something higher grade. If these are coming out of a radial source, and the more intercepts we get, the more that picture comes into focus. Like I said earlier, we only have 17 holes in this over a very large volume of rock. So there's a lot more information to be gained here. And the more we drill, the clearer that picture is. Another focus is going to be expanding the IP survey. A big part of next season's planning is going to be running some more deeper seam lines to the north and to the south, and give us more confidence at depth to the north and to the south on that inversion model. And that's just going to help us be more efficient honing into the better zones. So right now we see a large tract of open ground between the north and the south zone. So work is going to focus on just systematically exploring that. Now, the orientation of these holes is very likely subject to change. This is just to give a rough idea of the plan. And actually, this remains unchanged from about 3/4 of the way through the season in 2023, when we started to see what we were seeing in hole 11, hole 12, hole 14, hole 13. We're like, okay, this is, we're seeing a lot of similarities in the host rocks. The mineralized system is extensive. we need to systematically explore this. And so, yeah, we're looking forward to having 2 rigs next year. That'll be great. It'll allow us to have 1 rig chase unexpected results and another rig be focused on doing that systematic exploration. And all of that is going to help us put this together. And then with that, testing along this south zone, doing a bit more maybe detailed surface geochemistry to help us hone in there, because there does seem to be a correlating soil anomaly in that area. Very also another very encouraging thing to see. And then that again that expanded IP survey. That's all going to come together to help us target. So we're hoping by early to mid-May, get some boots on the ground with IP, process that up, and really look to the model for helping us fine tune our targeting for next season. Yeah. Going forward from there, everything else with the property in terms of social relationships, relationship with the local First Nation, that's on very, very good footing. Tony was great being proactive when they first got this property to really reach out to the LBN First Nation and seek consent before even the permit application was into the BC government, and any decision was made there. So there's a 5-year exploration agreement. We've had chief and members from council out to site, being broadly quite supportive of what we're doing. So yeah, excellent to see there. And then obviously Tech has been very supportive of our work as well. So they're providing some really valuable insight in terms of looking at some of our data, and have just been great to bounce ideas off of here. We look forward to continuing that relationship as well. And that kind of wraps up a summary. I mean, this was a pretty concise summary of what we did. There's a lot of data to go through. But I'd like to, we can open it up to questions now, or if Charlie has any comments, now would be a good time to jump in there. And yeah, if we want to see more detail, I can whip through the 3D model here as well, just to show, the relationship of everything in the property, historical drilling, our current drilling, the IP slices. So anything like that, we can kind of go through.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything specific to add. Neil, that was great. Thanks. All I would say is, this thing has size. We have very little information from depth, even though we've drilled, 17 holes that are deeper than the previous drilling. They're all, fairly far apart, believe it or not. So it's pretty clear it's a very large system. It has broad intercepts of quite high grade and very high grade mineralization, and it's just about putting all those things together and linking up some of those zones to show that the high grade has connectivity, I guess, within this great and very large mineralizing system. So it'd be, I think, a target for the majors, and an exit strategy for investors.
A lot, Charlie and Neil. That was a really great overview. 40 minutes going through that's exceptional. So let's open up for questions. If anybody has any questions, shoot it through the chat, or I've allowed you to unmute yourself. So as long as we kind of do it in an orderly fashion, feel free to unmute yourself. I know a couple people that have questions right now, so feel free to shoot. So okay, here's a question. Robert asked this based on what he's seeing from the IP. He says, is it really likely that we have near surface shoulder with higher grade, and the IP saying that it wraps around? the cylindrical shape. Is that kind of what we're seeing, and how we're going to unlock that value, Neil?
It's gonna be a matter of testing that. It's a working hypothesis right now with a lot of support from several different complementary data sets there, the drilling, the geology, and the geophysics. So it's going to be a matter of just systematically stepping out and testing the best part of that system. We know along the western margin of the porphyry stock, there is a very prominent linear in the magnetics, and that's likely a pre-existing fault. We don't see the geology offset by that. We don't see the porphyry stock offset by that, but that may be the conduit that was responsible for the initial emplacement of the porphyry stock and later stage fluid flow. And so it looks like from some of the near surface drilling right over top of that zone, the grade is a bit spottier, and that could be due to later stage, leaching of fluids during any reactivation of this. But then as we get down deeper in some of those historical holes, the grade starts to pick up. So, and that's getting outside of that relatively narrow corridor. So there may be a narrow zone in between the east and west, just hypothesizing right now, that might be a little lower grade from what we've seen from the sparse historical drilling there. But the fact that it picked right up again out towards hole 9 is very encouraging.
So Charlie, this one's for you. How's the size of NAC compared to GT Gold's Tataga?
Toga, yes, I see that came in from my friend Michael Stewart Carr. Hello, Michael. Yeah, I guess at Saddle North, that was the copper gold porphyry that we drilled off at, maybe still remains to be completely drilled off, but it had a very nice coincident IP chargeability high and a mag high sitting right over the min, and we banged into that pretty much right away, and then just sort of stuck to that signature, and it proved to be a good way to do it. But north to, or maybe not north to south, but from one side to another in the longer dimension, because it was kind of a bit of an oval shape, at least in plan view, and then kind of went down deep like a carrot, maybe not totally narrowing out at depth, but sort of that geometry. It was about 400 meters across, and you compare that to NAC, just the 22 drilling, and we've expanded on that, north to south, where we hit all the way down, and every one of those holes was 750 meters, and then 23, we sort of drilled the opposite direction, east to west, and we've showed that has great width. So overall that system is at least that big or bigger, I would say. And we haven't tested as deep as Saddle North, but when and if we tag in, well, we've tagged in the south zone to some pretty high grade stuff. If you chase that down, perhaps it'll go as deep or deeper, and you kind of need that if you're going to chase block cave kind of grades. So it's looking very large. And yeah, I mean, the big difference really, I guess, as I see it, and why I would plug some money in, as I did personally, is that it doesn't have the same topography and access issues. You can drive a drill on that thing right now, in a clear cut. Great location and access.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Charlie. I see a couple other questions. Will the South Zone fence have access road, or is it chopper again? We did chopper last year because we didn't want to overstep in terms of our relationship with the community, and we wanted to make sure we had something when we drilled 2309 and built a road. But we do have something there, and as Neil showed, we may have just positioned the collar a little bit too far to the north, and we're seeing similar shoulder zone that we drilled 2317 to what we could possibly drill in the southeast zone. So long story short, we're going to punch an access road over there, take down a few trees that we'll be able to bring our rig over there, with the truck. So yeah, it's going to be road access, so it's going to be a lot cheaper for us to drill. And another question: how, when are we starting our 2024 program? When are assays going to be coming out? One thing that I've learned, doing what I'm doing for almost 3 years now, is try not to give promises you can't keep. But I think, we want to drill in May. I think the latest we'll probably drill is probably early June. Then assays after that. It's a mug's game trying to guess when assays come out, but usually it takes between 6 weeks and 2 months for assays to come out. And the real question is, do we give them out by one or multiple? And that's kind of a capital markets decision. But if we do 2 rigs, we're gonna have a lot of drill holes to come out, so we'll probably not give each hole by each hole. But that's a decision we're gonna make down the line. But I'm pretty confident that a lot of those holes will be pretty exciting. Next question. So Nate, yeah. So Neil, I don't know if you see this question. Can you load up the IP slices for 17 and 12 going east to west, given what we know is fairly symmetrical shape and the given IP result and what we're seeing on the west side for a shoulder? Is there potential to see mineralization for the east side for a similar level? Is it predicated on the conglomeratic unit or otherwise? From Nate Smith.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if everyone can see. This is just the 3D workspace showing the IP voxel model, some slices through that, and the historical and 2022, 2023 drilling. So I'll just scroll through the actual anomaly. So this is the north zone. So this is hole 12, hole 4, 13, stepping that way, hole 14. And you can see the very strong correlation with that IP shoulder. You can also see there is very little drilling out to the east. The nearest drilling, or yeah, out to the east. So the nearest drilling out to the east actually intercepted some not terrible grade out in the zone, and there is no information beyond that. It's completely untested. This guy here, these ones were in the porphyry stock, which we know is, at least near surface, not a great host for mineralization. In a broad sense, there's definitely some high grade zones within it, but not surprising why those didn't hit. And then these ones, as we get a bit further to the south, are very strongly anomalous through the south zone, through that little peak up in the IP in the center there. It does correlate to a mineralized zone, and then we see hole 9 coming out to the east there, very open, and some decent encouragement actually in some of these very shallow historical holes as we get even much further to the south. So yeah, it's very compellingly open. Just to give some sense of scale on this, this is a 200 meter by 200 meter grid on here. So there's a lot of ground, and there's a lot of ground to test within a very encouraging geophysical signature. And again, this model is going to be refined, right? This is still quite coarse, and the information it's pulling in, especially deep, it's interpolating a lot from some very high grade responses, which is why it kind of blends in the middle down below the porphyry stock. So with some more lines to the north and to the south, we're going to get a lot more confidence at depth, and we're looking forward to getting on that mid-May. It doesn't take long to do the IP surveying here. We don't have to do any line cutting. The forest that's there is, really nice and open, and it's really easy terrain to move through for IP crews these days. A lot of the IP work in BC is in some pretty rugged, gnarly terrain. So yeah, the guys we had last season just cruised through it. So now we're looking forward to getting that.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Neil. Hopefully that answered your question, Nate. I'm sure there's going to be more to come, which I welcome you to keep on delivering. So I got another question. So, really quickly, are there drilling techniques, directional drilling that they do in oil and gas that we can do in exploration drilling? The short answer is yes. The long answer is no. Like that technology does exist. It's more on the operations side. It's still relatively new. But for exploration drilling and in order to maintain your core, it's pretty much straight down shots or on an incline on a straight line. So we're not adopting that technology. I'm sure things will change eventually, but the only way we can really start undergrounds if we're on the side of the mountain, which we're not. So we got to start at surface. So, you know, even if we were able to do that, it probably would cost a lot more to do it. So we just stick with the method that we have.
It's slightly different technology. You can wedge off of holes and you get down to a depth, put a wedge in, and then kick off shallower to expand more lateral distance to drilling without having to get down to that depth, drilling through that overlying package of rock. But it's slower. It's not as reliable a technique. In oil and gas, it's a little bit easier. The rocks are dominantly sedimentary, a little easier to drill through, and you're not coring, right? You're actually boring and grinding up that rock without retaining it. So it's a bit more complicated when you do the wedging, especially with this hard rock uh, deep exploration drilling. It's doable, but we would only likely do that if we knew we were in a very high grade zone. And the only way to test it was drilling through a bunch of dead rock. Like right now, we are looking forward to getting that near surface information on a lot of the holes we drill. So it's not a thought at this moment, but I wouldn't rule it out for the future.
Here's another question. How does the recent NAC discovery of copper and gold compare with Hercules Silver recent discovery? You know, that's a loaded question. You know, Hercules Silver, great company. I think there's room for a lot of really big successes in this exploration business, especially with the supply glut in copper, but we're completely different. They're an epithermal silver, you know, property where they probably found a nice copper porphyry. We've had a lot more historical drilling that are, you know, big hole 2317 followed up. We're in BC. They're in Idaho. You know, the big difference between those two discovery drill holes, you know, off 2317, I think our market cap went up 10 million. You know, off hole 26 or whatever it was for Hercules, their market cap went up 250 million. So there's a bit of delta there in terms of you know, in terms of valuation. It's up to investors to decide, you know, what should American Eagle be valued at. I certainly think that we're undervalued, but you know, it's really a tale of the tape and what people are willing to pay. But you know, I think the big similarity between both of those properties, I think they're different geologically, but I think they're both very good properties in the end. So talk to your geologist that you know or your investment advisor and just decide, you know, what's the better investment for you. It's all about, you know, minimizing, you know, your risk in the end. So I think we have a lot of questions. People always ask us, they want us to be the perfect property. What's a perfect property? It's Philo, and you know, with $3 billion less, we have a lot of questions. But each question that gets answered, that means we get de-risked even further, and our value should go up. So for a 45 million value company, I think it's a pretty good option in terms of investing. But again, talk to your investment advisor. But you know, to put a pin in it, both properties are very good, very different geology. Wildcatter, what's in your view a reasonable cutoff grade for an open pit in the area, and what critical tonnage would you say is enough to make it feasible? Also, same questions for bulk underground mine. You know, maybe Charlie, that's probably more for you there.
Well, I think you just look at Bell and Grand Isle. They were successful mining ventures. They were not all that large. Neil probably knows the tonnages and grades a bit better than I do, but and then for a block cave kind of operation. I think if I think back to GT times, I know the market and majors get very excited when they see plus 1%, but plus 0.75% really gets them excited, or did get them excited. And if gold and copper prices are higher than that, then that cutoff kind of would lower down a bit. And the other thing, I guess, for the open pit stuff, a cutoff grade, and we show these on our drill hole traces, is stuff over 0.2 is certainly copper equivalent is certainly very attractive for open pit, and a lot of our holes, we put that 0.2 cutoff on the drill hole traces, and there's a lot of good stuff up above that all the way down a lot of those holes.
Yeah, I think the big important thing to mention is that, you know, we essentially have Highland Valley mineralization throughout. We have scale, but you know what we have, that's a lot different than a lot of the projects in BC outside of the Golden Triangle. Is we have a high grade envelope that seems to be open west and, you know, north and south. So you figure that out, that pays for your processing facility. That makes everything else pay dirt. So that's really the key. It's about scale and it's about grade. So I think that we have both, but we're a $45 million company. We're going to drill it out, but this is a big transitional year for us. And I think we're going to answer a lot of questions that investors have.
Yeah, and scale and grade and proximity to surface. So that initial high grade, if you have something right near surface, that can make the payback pretty rapid.
Are we thinking about doing metallurgy work in 2024? Probably not 2024. Maybe next year, but our focuses are drilling. Whatever it costs for met work, we're better deferring that and putting that money into the ground. Do we have a potential resource here? Is there high grade? Those are the most important questions to ask. But if you want a proxy for the metallurgy, look at the old Bell Granite metallurgy reports, very similar rocks. The metallurgy is probably going to be similar, if not better, because 35 years has passed since they last mined there. So obviously technologies have moved. So just keep that in mind. Is there a 43-101 technical report available? We don't have one available. You need one when you go public, to say you have a company of merit, but we already had a 43-101 property, in a Rolodex at the time. So the exchange didn't make that mandatory for us. Now, having said that, we are probably going to put one together this year. We have one kind of off shelf that we haven't filed, but we're going to update it based on the last 2 years of drilling and then put that out to the public. But it's not going to have a resource on it. So you're saying 43-101 with a resource? No, we're not going to put that out. But it'll be probably a technical report going over the history of the program and what we've seen so far. So stay tuned for that. I may have missed it. When do you expect data from the new planned IP surveys? So, Neil, you can touch on this and also touch on some of the IP that we're planning on doing, moving forward this year.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how the spring shapes up. It's been a pretty slow start to the winter up there. Right now it's bitterly cold, but I don't think there's a ton of snow. But if the snow is gone by early May, we can get boots on the ground, right? But in order to do IP, we just need it to be snow-free. So as soon as we got snow-free there, we can get the guys doing the IP survey. I would expect by the end of May, we have those inversion results ready, and that's going to coincide with mobilizing the rigs and targeting those collars and going from there. So it's going to time out really well.
So Nate has a question about us expanding from 1 rig to 2, with the IP signature, etc. As you know, it all comes down to dollars and cents and us planning accordingly. One thing that I always want to do, which is why we did the second top up with tech, I don't want to be left with our pants down, so to speak, having to do a raise in the off season after coming off really good drill results. So we want to make sure we're always funded for the following year. And that's why we have funding for 10,000 meters this spring. But our plan is to do a 2-rig system, either start off with 1 rig and then have 2, or have the budget for 2 right off the start. But it's all based on, where our stock goes and be able to find those funds. The most important thing for me now, we're almost out of this bear market, it seems, but we're still in it. So I really want to look after shareholders and minimize our dilution and make sure if we ever do a fundraise, it's dilution by not diluting. It gives us an uplift in our price, which means a corporate deal or having a really strong strategic or expert get into the story. I'm not really interested in bringing a lot of funds in right now, because what they do, what I've seen is they coupon clip. Prefer to see what we did with tech, which was, a 30% premium, no broker warrants, no discount, etc. So that's kind of what we're looking for right now. So what we do next season and over the winter and doing double rigs, all based on what kind of money we have, but we always want to make sure our balance sheet is strong. So people have asked, about our share price action. I think we're getting through our warrants, and those warrants will give us enough money for a 2-rig program this year plus some. And I'm hoping, I'm cautiously optimistic that tech will match and maintain their 19.9, hopefully for a premium again. So technically speaking, we don't even have to go out for a raise. And that's one of the strategies and focuses that I had last year when we did those 3 deals with tech, and I guess Charlie Gregg too. And thanks, Charlie, for your well-earned money. And winter program, look, we can do a winter program, but like crops and anything else, you got to let this geology breathe. We're blessed with a smart team with Charlie and Neil at the helm. But, it's nice to be able to go through your assays, inspect your core, look at your geology, and properly target, not just blitzkrieg all the way through. And we can drill in the winter, we certainly can, but costs go up and it's a little bit more unpredictable. And given that it's our money and not JV money where it doesn't matter as much, we really want to make sure of that because that's shareholder money. And if we spend all of our money, that means a dilutive event. I'm trying to minimize that. So yes, we can drill in the winter. Will we? Probably not, but things can change. So let's see how the drilling starts off for 2024. I'm very confident based on what I'm talking to Charlie and Neil about. By the way, we got Charlie here. He's involved in GT Gold. This guy is in the warehouse inspecting all the core and relogging it. And Charlie, are you starting to put things together? Like to tell everyone what you told me. Like, are you starting to understand the geology? Are you feeling confident about the 2024 season?
Yeah, one of the points I made was, there's not that much information from this deep drilling when you get down. I mean, there's more holes, shallow holes from the historical drilling, but that's not really the area we're focusing on. And when you got 6 or 7 holes, and say in 2022, and they're spread out over 750 meters in their vertical holes. Well, it's kind of hard to link the geology from one hole to another because they're quite far apart. And no information shallow. Plus, there's no exposure at surface, so you have no geologic map to guide you, and that means you don't really understand the orientation of the host sedimentary rocks or dikes that are mineralized and are mineralizing the sedimentary rock. So it's important to try and get after that. So this year in the south zone there, after hitting on hole 1 from 2022, top of hole 2, which was at the same collar. So we got some information there. We drilled hole 8, the first hole of 2023, and we hit very nicely. So, I had to twist Tony's arm to get us to drill a parallel hole to hole 8. It's still 100 meters away, so that's actually still a fairly big reach out. Step out, and a bit, but they were parallel. They were both drilling to the west, from the south zone. There was still a step out from anything else. And then at the end of the program, we'd seen, okay, this very nice mineralization. We want to end out the program with a nice hole. So we argued back and forth about where we were going to drill that. I wanted to go farther north because I'm still pretty confident that we can carry the south zone up to the north zone and link some of the high grade we saw, say at moderate depth in hole 4, with some of these other great intercepts in 8 and 11, which appear to link up. But they wouldn't let me do that. I said, look, I'll bet my left, anyway, I was going to say a rude word, but I'm not, my left arm, maybe, that we would hit on those holes. Tony still wouldn't let me do it. So Neil and I planned this hole drilling, west to east, hole 17, but also a little bit oblique to holes 8 and 11, so that we get a little bit more information kind of up dip and down dip from those holes. It wasn't a cheater hole. Yes, we went through some of the same nice mineralization we saw in 8 and 11, but we really extended that up dip and down dip with hole 17. So a lot of new information, plus we stepped to the west and bingo, we hit very nicely. Then getting to Tony's question is, okay, all of a sudden we've got 3 or 4 holes that are basically on the same section. So it's a thick section, going down to depth, north and south, but it's basically an east-west section that brings in quite a bit of material from north and south through a pretty darn nice zone. So we can actually try and link up some of this stuff. So we've gone back to these holes, and the relogging. Some of the rocks are difficult to characterize and to correlate, but it helps to have the 4 acid data to do that. We've got that in hand, so we're re-looking at the core. We got it laid out in a nice warehouse that's not no snow in it. It's got wood heat. It's fairly comfortable, and we're able to link things up. So now we sort of see, hey, the bedding that we see in the host rocks, the host conglomerates, which are a really, really nice host, appear to depth easterly, moderately easterly, the gently easterly. We never knew that before. So that's good. We know where those preferential host rocks are going, and we're starting to be able to link up the dikes with this. So, we're going to be able to generate a nice looking geologic section. We're trying to put that together right now. We have it in our minds. Hopefully, we'll have it on a piece of paper to show everybody at the core shack. So we're really starting to get a handle on that geology, and then knowing that geology, then we can chase it out, because the dikes seem to be, in that area anyway, a real control on mineralization, and then that really juicy host rock, which really seems to accept the mineralization near to these dikes. You put those two things together, and hopefully we're off to the races with a good understanding of the controls on mineralization.
So Charlie, these country rocks where we're getting these high grade, where we're seeing this high grade here, it's not typical. These rocks don't look like core rocks. So the big question is there a feeder source coming from somewhere? And that's kind of why we got in this project in the first place. And how the heck do we find it? And do you think it's there?
Well, the expression I use is, you know, um, you go home from the dance with who brung you, and who brung us on this one is the conglomerate and these dikes. Are those dikes that have the highest copper mineralization? Are they coming from some source? Possibly. That it's in the part that we're drilling. It's not a classic, really. That part isn't really a classic porphyry in terms of these really, really tight stockworks like that you had at GT Gold, where the best of it had probably 40% veining. I mean, we don't have that much veining. You just get this beautiful disseminations in the dikes, in the host rocks, some veins, and some of them are spectacular. There's no doubt about it, but not, just a network of stockwork veins for the most part. So yeah, there's a possibility that that's down there, and I think the systematic drilling is just going to help us lead to that. If it exists, and yeah, very well could. So lots of upside.
Talking to someone, another geologist, I want to remind people, these holes were all based off very shallow historical drill holes, next to no geology, and based on geophysics. And this year, when American Eagle is investing in Charlie and his team on putting the proper geology, with these incline deep holes that we've had that's never been on the property, it's going to be the first year that we're targeting based on geology. And as Robert said, the best pathfinder to copper and gold is copper and gold. And it's going to be the first year that we actually drill that. And, don't put the ceiling on that 300 meters of 1.09% copper equivalent. There's a better chance than not that we can come up with even better drill holes than that. So we're 17 drill holes in, and we're just getting started. We've drilled for 15 months from start to right now. So give us some time, let us unlock some value, and we're going to continue answering some of those questions that people have. Now, Nate, take yourself off mute, because I don't want to read this paragraph you have, and just shoot it to Neil, and then Neil can answer your question.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and sorry, Charlie, you actually did just touch on it a little bit, right? We're talking about this conglomeratic unit soaking up a lot of the mineralization from what we suspect is the veining and dikes that have intruded into it. Is it safe to say that with this IP signature, you're going to look to drill along that in a grid-like fashion to really bulk out the volume of that conglomeratic unit, while also keeping an eye to the potential of saying, okay, hang on, this was where the source seems strongest, and then look to maybe drill deeper down into that, i.e. to go from this, I'm not going to call it a secondary mineralization, but this conglomeratic unit down to, say, the primary source? Is that safe to say? And what would be the criteria for that, or the green light credentials to say, we're going to go deep here? Is that in the cards for 2024? Or is that a wait and see, or is that all dependent on anything? Can you comment on any of that?
Well, I'll do a quick answer first. Maybe Neil wants to elaborate, but I mean, I would say, okay, we've got some of these dikes. They're actually, quite potassium feldspar rich. So they're sort of cyanitic to monzonitic kind of dikes that have a lot of bornite in them. They're not the only mineralizer, but they seem to be really, really good grades. So if we could get the orientation of those, and where they intersect the conglomerates. I mean, the way I kind of see it right now, and again, it's always a method of multiple working hypotheses if you want, but so that could change as we go along, as we get more information. But I would say, where do those things intersect the conglomerates? Can we track those out, those two controls on mineralization? So we're not just going after conglomerate, because we know there's lots of conglomerates out there that don't have a speck of mineralization. It's kind of where the two come together. And then, trying to find a source. There's a lot of real estate down there when you start drilling deep. So if you're going to go try after a source, you just got to step down and use all that information: geology, mineralization, alteration, and the geophysics, and where all those sources of information, those data sets, kind of come together. Particularly if you got a nearby drill hole, just baby steps down, you'd be adding grade in tons, hopefully, and just step toward that. But don't go wildcatting too much, I would say, unless you see some really good information in your different data sets.
Yeah, and just to add to that, like, the conglomerates are a very good host for mineralization, but just to really emphasize, it really does seem to be proximity to these mineralizing dikes. We hit intervals of conglomerate that don't carry mineralization, and so that leads me to think that it's either not one broad continuous unit. Maybe there just is not a fluid pathway between some. If these are lensoidal bodies of conglomerate that aren't interconnected, then that would explain why some of these aren't being mineralized. It seems less likely that this is one giant cohesive body that's piping into the source and acting as an entire fluid conduit for mineralization. So it's these things right now, we just don't have enough drilling to piece it together as one continuous body. And so, yeah, that's why we're focusing on that interaction between the conglomerates and the dikes.
That being said, though, we do get hundreds of meters of conglomerates that seem to link up from in hole 17, 8, and 11. And we've got hole 1 pulled out, so we're going to try and look at that in the next 2 or 3 days as well. I think we can link them all together. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I have a question about the warrants. I got to look at how many warrants are outstanding. There have been some trickling in. I think for the most part, it's not the warrants that keep the prices down. It's the people that are selling their shares to finance the purchase of their warrants that keep the price down. And you usually see that predominantly right after a big news hits. The rest of the warrants that get exercised, for the most part, they're from people that either sold their shares or have enough questions answered that they want more shares. So I think the downwards pressure from those warrants have dissipated. But you got to remember, when you do a raise on the retail market, which those warrants came from, it comes with a 7% broker fee, 7% fee in general to the brokers, and then it comes with usually a 10 to 15% discount. So if you look at 30-cent warrants that are getting exercised, in reality, those are no different than people buying in the market for 40 to 42 cents. So it's not that bad. Plus, it gives you free money, and it also allows you to get a big premium on hopefully another participation by a strategic partner such as Tech. So those warrants aren't a bad thing, and we really like them, and it keeps us from diluting more by doing another raise, which we don't want to do. We want to keep this share structure as tight as possible. My goal is to get investors to buy in the market, whether it's companies, funds, retail, etc. And how you do that, you just dry up supply, and we're shortly starting to see that. And that's why I really like those 11 million shares traded last week when we came out with the news. Those are old investors out and new investors in at a higher base price. And I think there's consolidation right now. But after this presentation, as more information comes out, especially when people see the core for themselves and more funds get involved, a lot of light bulbs are going to come on. So the question, like I mentioned, is how much do you want to de-risk before you get involved? Because I really do think that this NAC project is special and it is unique. And I don't want to compare myself to Hercules. I don't want to compare myself to Philo. I don't want the knives coming out. But the one thing I can say, if you look at any great deposit around the world, they are all unique. And I think NAC is one of those unique projects. So I'm really excited what we have, and we've got a great team behind us. With no further ado, I think I've answered most of the questions unless someone else wants to jump in. I want to remind everyone, we recorded this session. We're not going to share the Q&A, but we will have Neil's presentation up. We're going to come out. We're going to be at Roundup and presenting at MIF. And like always, if people have any questions, you know, as Nate knows and some other investors, contact me personally by email, send questions through on Twitter or co.ca. We're happy to answer them. The great thing about being part of a great project is that we're not afraid of any questions. I think, you know, all questions are good and they unlock value, and we're really excited about the prospects of this project. So I want to thank everyone for their time. It's the middle of the day. Appreciate it. And Charlie, Neil, you know, thank you so much. Oh, another question. Okay, thank you. Okay. Looks like all the questions there. Nathan, do you have anything else?
No, not well, actually, no, we talked a little bit about potential of a site visit there. I really appreciate you responding to that, and I look forward to possibly seeing that shape up sometime later this year. Just a general comment, but yeah, it would be great to do boots on the ground. I understand and respect the understanding that there's a lot of vegetation and coverage, so there won't be necessarily a lot to see, but I think just the travel to and from and seeing the local site, as well as getting back to, we'll say, infrastructure available, it will be of a benefit for any of the considerable investors that are out there.
Yeah, look, I'm looking forward to hosting something at some point during the summer when we figure out Smithers and the schedule with the team there. But that's something certainly we'll entertain. As I always say, the best fertilizer is the footsteps of the farmer, and I guess in this case, it's the footsteps of the investor. So you kind of have to see it and feel it. And when I went to Smithers and site, it really changed my appreciation for this project. And Charlie's right, this infrastructure really is key. We don't pay enough attention to it. Okay, guys. Well, thanks a lot.